This, as well as many other devices she uses, make the book feel quite full of tropes. And you have to remind yourself as you're reading this, it's a trope because others copied her, not vice versa. Hello everyone, my name is Patricia Meredith, and I am the author of Historical Mysteries set in 1901 Spokane, the Spokane Clock Tower Mysteries, the first 3 of which are available in all formats. I am currently working on a new book about Anna Katharine Green. And if you joined me last month, I introduced you to Anna Katharine Green through the lens of one of her contemporaries, the one and only Wilkie Collins. Now, another thing that's fascinating about Anna Katharine Green is her book, The Leavenworth Case, came out 9 years before the first Sherlock Holmes. That's right, her detective Ebenezer Gryce came before the great Sherlock Holmes. Now, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was actually inspired by Anna Katharine Green's writing, so much so that when he came to America, he sought to meet her in person. Not only that, but we see reflections of her writing, some things that she introduced to the mystery genre through her writing in his Sherlock Holmes works. Now, absolutely, Sherlock Holmes has become much more recognizable than Anna Katharine Green, but when she first released her first book, she was not a forgotten female like she is today. Instead, she was a blockbuster overnight success with the release of her first book. So like I said, my current work in progress is about Anna Katharine Green. I have chosen to set the story in 1872 New York, which is when she began the writing of the Leavenworth Case. Now, it would actually be another 6 years before she published the work, and one of the things that I love to do as a historical fiction author is to find those crevices in history and fill in that gap with a reason, a story, a reflection of why did she have to wait 6 years. So in my book, we'll be exploring what inspired her to write her first book and really getting into her head. So one of the best things that I have found while researching for her is that she was interviewed quite a bit about her writing throughout the years after the publication of her first novel. Now, she followed that with 36 other novels before her death. And she was so influential that she inspired Agatha Christie, Dorothy L. Sayers, and so many other names, including, like I said, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. So over the next couple of months leading up to the release of my book, I will be endeavoring to reconnect you with the historical importance of this wonderful woman, Anna Katharine Green. So by far, one of the best things that I came across in my research when looking for actual articles by Anna Katharine Green was a letter to a paper, an article that was published by her. Well, can I even say by her? Because actually the letter is from her Detective Gryce to Sherlock Holmes. So this particular letter was published in the Los Angeles Times, December 16th, 1917. And here's how the article begins. It was entitled, A Letter to Sherlock Holmes. In spite of war and censors, Anna Katharine Green succeeded in getting across to her publishers this interesting bit of correspondence between 2 famous detectives. Detective Gryce, first employed by her in the Leavenworth Case, proves himself more ingenious than ever in her new story, The Mystery of the Hasty Arrow, recently published by Dodd, Mead and Company. This was New York, USA, November 12th, 1917. To Mr. Sherlock Holmes, care Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, England. My dear Sherlock Holmes, it is with regret that I learned from a recent notice in one of our papers that you have become afflicted with rheumatism. I trust, however, that it may not seriously interfere with the continuance of your illustrious career. I know whereof I write, for the malady has clung to me ever since I was entrusted with the solution of the Leavenworth case, by my friend Anna Katharine Green. I had no choice but to go on in her service, she kindly permitting me to engage as assistant such a clever fellow as Sweetwater. And on one occasion, when that affair next door gave me unusual concern, Miss Butterworth not only helped me during a severe attack of my, permit me to say, our enemy, but aided in the disentanglement of a complicated situation by her astuteness. I am just through with the case of the Hasty Arrow, an extremely involved matter, and rather unusual since it aroused my sympathy and at the same time gave me no end of concern before it was cleared up. Now that the whole matter has been settled to the satisfaction of the authorities and Miss Green, I understand that the affair with its intricacies, love, pathos, and tragedy is to be published in book form, with such additions as will make the report more full than the papers made it at the time it took place. As soon as a copy of the book is to be had, it will give me pleasure to send you one. At the same time, may I express the hope that your rheumatic affliction has not unduly influenced you to determine to make your last bow. Try to induce Conan Doyle to give you some clever fellow as an assistant, for now that we have a bond of sympathy, let us proceed to end our days in the harness, and help our friends Doyle and Green out of their various difficulties as occasion may demand. With keen appreciation, I am, yours truly, Ebenezer Gryce. Now, is that not one of the most amazing marketing ploys? Let's admit it. That was her finding a very creative way to tie in a very well-known author into her new book. And I love all the references in there to the rheumatism and everything. So one of the other places where I found in the contemporary literature that Anna Katharine Green was compared to Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was in a book that was published in 1918, and it was called The Women Who Make Our Novels, and it was by Grant Martin Overton. And here is what he has to say. Without ever having created a character to compare with Sherlock Holmes, she has constructed tales more baffling than any of the crimes Sir Conan Doyle's detectives solved. She has not had to resort to exotic coloring, as Doyle has sometimes had to do, to conceal thinness of story. He goes on to actually also compare her to a couple other well-knowns, so I'll go ahead and continue that here. She has not had to depend upon abstruse mathematical ciphers and codes, as Poe did in The Gold Bug. She has not had to carry us through generations and coincidences, as Gaboriau did in file number 113. She never employs the fanciful inversions and mystical paradoxes by which Gilbert K. Chesterton establishes, not so much the existence of crime and criminals as the innocence of Father Brown. She can handle more complex strands than Melville Davisson Post. In her way, and we have tried to show her way and to differentiate it from the ways of others, she is the most accomplished storyteller in American literary history. She is unique, and with anything unique, it is well to be satisfied. How about that for a review? One of the things I want to share is some ways that I think Anna Katharine Green inspired Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. So some things that you might find very similar in the Leavenworth case in particular, in comparison to lots of the things that we associate with Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and Sherlock Holmes. So here are some of the quotes that really stick out to me in the Leavenworth case that make me think of things Sherlock Holmes is known for saying. Now, I could play a whole game of did Sherlock say this or did Detective Gryce say this? Let's see what you think when I read you this quote. Is this from Sherlock or from Detective Gryce? Now, it is a principle which every detective recognizes, that if of 100 leading circumstances connected with a crime, 99 of these are acts pointing to the suspected party with unerring certainty, but the 100th equally important act, one which that person could not have performed, the whole fabric of suspicion is destroyed. What did you guess? That's right, it's Detective Gryce. That's who said that, not Sherlock. Now, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle rewrites it in a different way that is familiar to everybody in Sherlock's work, but again, inspired by Anna Katharine Green. That is a very pleasing belief, he observed. I honor you for entertaining it, Mr. Raymond. Doesn't that just sound like something Sherlock would say to Watson? You know, good for you that you think you have a thought, but you're wrong. And perhaps one of my favorite ones It is not enough to look for evidence where you expect to find it. You must sometimes search for it where you don't. So another quote that Detective Gryce says is in answer to the question of whom he suspects of the murder. He says, "Everyone and nobody. It is not for me to suspect, but to detect." And again, I can just hear Sherlock Holmes saying something like that. In fact, one of the things that Anna Katharine Green was most well known for in her books was the degree of detail she goes into about certain things, especially firearms, which was something that women were not necessarily supposed to understand in the 1870s. And yet she is capable of writing such incredible descriptions as a Smith & Wesson pistol, number 32 ball, which would fit perfectly into that pistol. I could tell that a bullet had recently been fired from one of the chambers. Although the barrel had been cleaned so that it showed no evidence, the cylinder had a bit of smut lining one of the chambers, which indicates a bullet had recently passed through it. Someone cleaned the barrel, but not the cylinder, and in so doing, left unintended evidence behind. Should you request that the coroner call for a clerk from a pistol and ammunition store, he will surely tell you the same. And in fact, much of the inquiry surrounds the fact that they don't believe a woman would know anything about cleaning a gun. In fact, Gryce says, "Did you ever know a woman who cleaned a pistol? No. They can fire them, and do, but after firing them, they do not clean them." So in some ways, Gryce is actually the first time we see the armchair detective, the detective who solves the mystery without collecting clues himself and only by using his extensive knowledge of human nature and his deductive powers, or his little gray cells, as Poirot will say. And we'll get into Agatha Christie's connection with Anna Katharine Green next month. But this month, with the connection with Sherlock Holmes, he also is seen sitting in chairs and just considering the facts that have been brought before him. So, like Detective Gryce, he suffers from rheumatism and gout. We see him often considering things from his armchair. And in the Leavenworth case, Gryce, the second or third time that we see him after Mr. Raymond goes to meet him for the first time at the house where Mr. Leavenworth is found dead, the next time he sees him, we go to the house of Detective Gryce, and he's lying on his couch with bandages around his hands and feet. And because of his health, he is often laid up, which forces him to ask the assistance of others, like the lawyer, to gather clues for him. So also in this book, we see that work of two detectives working together, or a detective and an assistant, usually a detective and an amateur. And of course, we see that reflected in Sherlock Holmes with his use of Watson. And then also later in other books, that trope is something that continues through a lot of detective literature. So actually something that's quite interesting to note is that when Anna wrote her detective mysteries, they were not called that. They were called criminal romances. The first use of the genre term detective fiction wasn't actually used until 1900, after Sherlock Holmes became so popular. He was taking over the genres. And although she wasn't the first to write a mystery with a love story at its center, this, as well as many other devices she uses, make the book feel quite full of tropes. And you have to remind yourself as you're reading this, it's a trope because others copied her, not vice versa. She was defining the ingredients of the detective mystery genre. So, if you like classic mystery, and especially if you're a huge fan of Sherlock Holmes and are looking for something different to read, I highly recommend that you check out Anna Katharine Green. Now, I began with the Leavenworth case. That's her very first novel. It's probably not her best one, but I will have to do a tier ranking video once I've read all of them and decide which one is actually my absolute favorite. So far, I've really enjoyed That Affair Next Door, which is the first appearance of Gryce alongside Miss Butterworth. And yes, Miss Butterworth, not the syrup. She is fantastic, and she is a very Miss Marple type character. So again, we will look more at the connection with Agatha Christie next month. I hope that you'll tune in for that. In the meantime, in anticipation of my newest book that will be releasing in May of this year. Go ahead and pick up the Spokane Clock Tower Mysteries if you haven't done so already, and I hope that you'll enjoy the reading of those. And then when this one comes out, this will be a standalone to begin, possibly the beginning of a new series. I haven't decided yet. It's been a lot of research to write this book, and so I'm starting to think it might be a standalone, but hopefully you all will enjoy it so much that you'll cry for more. And if not, it will be a wonderful reintroduction of the world to this fantastic forgotten female. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you'll hear the next time I post a video. I'm uploading a new one every Saturday and going live every last Saturday of the month. I hope you'll join me then. Thank you so much. Have a good weekend.